My brother hid my passport in his gun safe the night before I was supposed to fly to Phoenix for nursing school, and he didn't even bother lying about it the next morning. My name is Sienna Hargrove, and I was 26 years old when my own family decided my future belonged to them instead of me. I'd spent 4 years working double shifts at a diner in our little town outside Knoxville, Tennessee, saving every tip, every overtime check, every birthday card with a 20 folded inside, until I had enough to cover the deposit on a tiny studio apartment near the nursing program I'd gotten into. Arizona State College of Nursing. Full acceptance, financial aid approved, a seat reserved in a cohort starting in 3 weeks. I had the printout of my acceptance letter taped inside my closet door, so it would be the first thing I saw every morning and the last thing I saw every night. A reminder that all the exhaustion meant something. I wore the same pair of work boots for 3 years because new ones felt like a luxury I couldn't justify when I was trying to build a life I actually wanted. I skipped my cousin's bachelorette weekend in Gatlinburg because the gas money and the hotel split would have eaten into my moving fund. I ate peanut butter sandwiches for lunch for longer than I'd like to admit. None of that bothered me, not really, because I had a date circled on my calendar and a plan that was finally coming together. The night before my flight, I packed my one suitcase with the kind of careful precision you only get from triple-checking something that matters more than anything else in your life. Scrubs I'd bought secondhand and washed until they looked new. My nursing textbooks, dog-eared already from studying ahead. My birth certificate, my social security card, my passport, because Arizona State had a study abroad partnership in my second year, and I wanted everything in order from day one. I went to bed with my alarm set for 5 in the morning and my chest full of something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Excitement that didn't feel dangerous. I woke up to my mother standing in my bedroom doorway with the overhead light flicked on, and my older brother Caleb right behind her, arms crossed over his chest like he was guarding something. "You're not getting on that plane," my mother said. Not a question. Not even really directed at me, more like an announcement to the room. I sat up, heart already pounding, and asked her what she was talking about. That's when Caleb held up my passport, dangling it between 2 fingers, like it was something he'd confiscated from a child caught sneaking candy. "Dad's knee surgery is in 10 days, Caleb said, like that explained anything. "Somebody has to be here to help him through recovery. Mom can't do it alone and run the shop." My father had been scheduled for that surgery for 2 months. Everyone in the family knew. Nobody had said one word to me about being responsible for it until the night before I was supposed to leave the state. I told them the surgery had been planned forever, that I'd offered back in the spring to help coordinate his physical therapy remotely, that I had already arranged for our aunt to come stay for the recovery window specifically, so this wouldn't be a problem. My mother waved her hand like none of that mattered. "Family doesn't outsource family," she said. "You're the daughter. This is your responsibility." I want to be clear about something, because I've heard people say versions of this story and miss the point. This wasn't really about my father's knee. My father, when I finally got him alone weeks later, told me quietly that he never asked anyone to keep me home, that he'd assumed I'd already left by the time his surgery date arrived. This was about control. This was about a family that had built an entire identity around me being the responsible one, the available one, the daughter who didn't have a life big enough to interfere with theirs. I had spent 26 years being useful. The moment I tried to be something more than useful, the family closed ranks. I begged. I'm not going to pretend I had some dignified moment of quiet resolve in that bedroom, because I didn't. I cried and I pleaded, and I reminded my mother of every shift I'd picked up, every dollar I'd saved, every sacrifice that had led to this exact morning. I told her this program didn't defer easily, that missing orientation could cost me my spot entirely. My mother told me I was being dramatic. My brother told me nursing school would still be there in a year. He said it so easily, like 4 years of my life were a coupon that just needed renewing. They left my room with my passport. I heard the lock turn on my father's old gun safe down the hall, the one that had sat in the corner of his study for as long as I could remember, mostly empty except for a couple of hunting rifles, and now, apparently, my entire future. I missed my flight. I sat on my bedroom floor and watched the departure time pass on my phone, then the boarding time, then the actual takeoff time, the numbers blurring together until I finally just turned the screen off because I couldn't look at it anymore. I didn't go downstairs that day. I didn't eat. My mother knocked once around dinner time to tell me she'd made extra cornbread if I wanted any, like the whole conversation that morning had been a minor disagreement about chores. I cried for 2 days straight. Not the kind of crying that feels cleansing. The kind that leaves your eyes swollen shut and your throat raw and your whole body feeling like it's been hollowed out and left somewhere cold. I kept replaying the moment Caleb held up my passport, that casual little dangle, like he was showing me a parking ticket instead of 4 years of my life. On the third morning, I woke up and looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, and the girl staring back at me looked like a stranger. Puffy, gray, defeated. Something in me went quiet and hard at the same time, the way water goes still right before it freezes. I thought about my acceptance letter taped inside my closet door, and I thought, not like this, not after everything. I showered. I put on real clothes for the first time in 3 days. And I drove myself 45 minutes to the regional passport agency office in Knoxville, because somewhere in the back of my mind I had a vague memory that there were rules about this, that a passport wasn't just a family heirloom someone could lock in a safe whenever they felt like it. The waiting room was beige and fluorescent and smelled like burnt coffee, and I sat there clutching a printed number like it was a life raft. When my number was finally called, I walked up to the counter and explained everything as steadily as I could manage to the woman behind the glass. The diner job, the savings, the acceptance letter, the locked safe. My voice cracked exactly once on the word safe, and I watched something shift in her expression, a kind of recognition that told me this wasn't the first time she'd heard a story like mine. What she told me changed the entire shape of my life. She explained, plainly and without judgment, that a U.S. passport issued to an adult is the property of the United States government, not of the holder's family. She said that once I turned 18, no parent, no sibling, no relative anywhere had any legal authority to take it, withhold it, or lock it away from me, regardless of family obligations, regardless of guilt, regardless of tradition. She told me that what my family had done could be reported, that withholding a federal document from its rightful adult holder, through coercion or confinement, could rise to the level of a crime depending on the circumstances, and that at minimum, I had every right to request an emergency replacement passport on the basis that mine was inaccessible to me through no fault of my own. She slid a form across the counter. Application for a replacement passport, plus a supplemental statement explaining the circumstances. She told me to be honest and specific. My hand shook through the first few lines, then steadied as I kept writing, like the simple act of putting words to what had happened was giving me back something I didn't know I'd lost. She also gave me a card for a local family law clinic that handled cases involving adult children and parental overreach. More common, she said gently, than most people realized. I sat in that waiting room for another hour finishing the paperwork, and when I finally handed it back, she stamped it, told me expedited processing would take about a week given the circumstances, and looked me dead in the eye and said, "You did the right thing coming in." I called the legal clinic the next morning from the parking lot of the diner before my shift, sitting in my car with the engine off so nobody inside would overhear. A woman named Renata took my call and asked me to come in that same afternoon. I went straight from work, still in my uniform, my apron balled up on the passenger seat. Renata's office was small, lined with file boxes, and she listened to the entire story without interrupting once, occasionally jotting something down. When I finished, she set her pen down and told me my case was, in her words, depressingly straightforward. She explained that a formal letter could be sent to my parents on the clinic's letterhead, demanding return of any personal documents within a specified window and outlining the legal consequences of continued withholding, including potential charges related to unlawful restraint of property, and, depending on how the situation had unfolded that night, possibly more. She asked if I wanted to pursue anything beyond getting my passport back. I told her I just wanted my life back. She nodded like she'd expected that answer and respected it anyway. She also helped me call the nursing program's admissions office. I sat in her office with my stomach in knots, certain I was about to hear that my spot was gone. Instead, the woman on the phone, after hearing the documented circumstances, told me the program had a hardship deferral policy for exactly this kind of situation, and that I could start with the following cohort in January, instead of losing my spot entirely. I cried in Renata's office, but it was a different kind of crying. Relief instead of grief. The letter went out on a Tuesday. I know because I was the one who drove past the house and saw the certified mail truck parked outside. I didn't go in. I waited 2 streets over until the truck left, then drove to my friend Holly's place, where I'd been staying since the night they took my passport, and waited to see what would happen. My mother called me that evening, her voice tight in a way I'd never heard before. She didn't apologize. She asked, instead, why I would do this to the family, why I would embarrass my father by sending lawyers after them. I told her as calmly as I could that I hadn't done anything to the family. I had simply asked for what was legally mine. She hung up on me. My passport showed up at Holly's house 3 days later, mailed in a plain envelope with no note, no explanation, no apology. Just the passport itself, slightly bent at one corner like it had been tossed into the envelope without care. I used the months before January to rebuild things on my own terms. I opened a bank account my mother had no access to, something I realized with a sick feeling. She'd technically had partial visibility into my old one since I was a teenager, and we'd never bothered changing it. I changed my emergency contact on every document I could find to Holly instead of my mother. I had one final conversation with my father, the one where he told me quietly that he'd never asked anyone to keep me home, that he was sorry, in his limited way, for staying silent while it happened. I believed him, mostly. I told him I loved him, and that I hoped his recovery went well, and that conversation is the last real one we've had. I told my younger cousin, Daisy, who was 19 and starting to feel the same pressure to stay close and stay useful, that if she ever needed somewhere to go, my door was open, no questions, no conditions. She hugged me for a long time at Thanksgiving that year, the one Thanksgiving I went back for, and didn't say much. I understood that hug completely. The morning of my new flight, in January, I woke up before my alarm in Holly's guest room, the sky still dark outside the window. I got dressed quietly, rolled my suitcase to her car, and we drove to the airport with the radio low and neither of us saying much, because there wasn't much that needed saying. My mother texted me once that morning. 3 words, "Have a nice flight." No warmth in it, just an obligation fulfilled, a box checked. I didn't respond. At the airport, I went through check-in and security and made my way to the gate with my own passport in my own hand for the first time in months, and I felt something settle in my chest that I can only describe as the beginning of peace. And then, right at the gate, something happened that I genuinely was not prepared for. A TSA officer near the boarding line glanced at my ID, looked up at my face, and paused. My stomach dropped instantly, the old fear flooding back before I could stop it. Certain something was wrong, certain this was somehow going to be taken from me, too. She asked me to step aside for a moment, and I felt my whole body go cold. But when she looked at me again, her expression wasn't suspicious. It was something closer to recognition. "You came through here back in the fall," she said. "October, I think. You had a one-way to Phoenix and you never made your flight. I remember because you'd done the whole pre-check process online, and then you just never showed." I told her briefly, standing right there at the gate with the line building behind me, what had happened. Not all of it, just enough. The locked safe, the passport agency, the months it took to get here. She was quiet for a second, and then she said something I don't think I'll ever forget. She said, "Well, I'm glad you made it back." Then she stepped back, let me through, and as I walked past her toward my gate, I heard her say, just loud enough for me to catch it, "Have a good life." I studied nursing in Phoenix for 2 years. I graduated with honors, which surprised exactly no one who knew how hard I'd fought to be in that room. I work in a pediatric ICU now, in a hospital 40 minutes from a small rental house I own outright because I refinanced smart and worked every overtime shift I could stomach for 3 years straight. I built a life that belongs entirely to me, filled with people who chose to be in it, rather than people who assumed I'd always be available. My mother and I speak maybe twice a year, brief and careful conversations that never go deeper than the weather and my father's health. Caleb and I haven't spoken since the morning he dangled my passport in front of me like it was nothing. I'm not interested in performing forgiveness I don't feel, and I'm not interested in pretending that morning didn't change something permanent between us. It did. It should have. I saved for 4 years to build a future that was mine. My family locked it in a safe and thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. I got it back, and I left, and I never once looked behind me to see if anyone was watching me go.